Look at what is already known. Consider the context, might as well give it a try. How can we make use of our personal, of our collective, and especially from our ancestors' knowledge? How can we use it to address modern day problems? Today I want to talk about ancestral wisdom in combination with frugal innovation. I think many of you might have heard of the concept, or rather the belief, that modern day problems require strictly modern day solutions, high-tech solutions. And I don't want to completely argue against it, don't get me wrong. However, I do want to stress that there are already many great ideas out there that could be used, that could be enhanced, revitalized, or even recontextualized in order to address these problems. In its essence, ancestral wisdom is really a rich tapestry of knowledge that has been passed over generations and generations and generations. This wisdom is often in a deep, deep connection with the natural world, meaning that it has a great respect, a very profound respect for how things work together. So for the interconnectedness of all things. By the way, when I'm talking about ancestors, I'm really talking about the knowledge that we've gotten from our grandparents, that they are passing on from their grandparents, and even in more general terms, knowledge that has withstood the test of time. Today we are sort of grappling with questions on how to live well, how to create a sustainable future, and how to care for our surroundings. And while high-tech solutions have a lot to offer to address these issues, I would like to emphasize that by looking back into the past and looking at ancestral wisdoms can really help us gain new perspectives and also get inspired by them. So, but where does frugal innovation come into play? Well, if we're talking about innovation in general, we're rather talking about a rather exclusive endeavor that requires high inputs, such as investments, be they public or private, in order to create products and services that are rather catered to an elite clientele. In contrast, frugal innovation really tries to maximize the output, maximize the value by using less and fewer resources. So it's essentially doing more by needing less and also catering to a larger audience, an audience that might have been inaccessible before. Well, still, frugal innovation is rather a concept and an approach that is seen in emerging economies, where there might be constraints such as institutional limitations, material limitations, or financial limitations. However, I would also like to make the point that there's even an application in advanced economies. And we will look at 3 examples for that. But let me just put it in a nutshell. So the first one is the overemphasis of high-tech solutions. So there might be low-tech solutions out there that may be way more adequate and also more effective than the high-cost, the high-tech, costly innovations. The second point is affordability and accessibility. So some of the high-tech is just, it requires so high inputs that it's not accessible for marginalized communities. And the third point, the unsustainability. So since these high-tech innovations require these high inputs, they also need high inputs to be maintained. So let's dive into 3 maybe less known cases to illustrate what I'm trying to say. So firstly, I would like to talk about natural building materials, traditional modes of construction, combined with modern-day design. Last year, a good friend of mine has started this project to address the housing crisis. Not the housing crisis here in the Netherlands, but much rather in Ghana. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, there's currently a deficit of 1.8 million housing units. So in comparison to the Netherlands, and also with respect to the differences in population sizes, this accounts to double the deficit that we are experiencing here in the Netherlands. So what he's trying to bring forward is a solution that is relying on traditional modes and traditional building materials. This is what you can see and what his family has started to build, a very, an ordinary house that we all know. It's made out of concrete and it's made out of steel. Materials that are very costly to import. This issue, not only the price, but also this issue is compounded by factors such as high rental rates and high mortgage rates. Furthermore, these building materials are mostly pegged to the dollar. So that means that building a house and also the construction planning is very sensitive to fluctuations in prices, making it unaffordable for people. So his solution, relying on the traditional clay building technique. This is a traditional house, so this is not what he's trying to build. He's much rather trying to revitalize it and really to combine it with modern design that is also sustainable. So if people make the investment to get a traditional house that is made out of clay, that it really is sustainable and it can stay for a longer time. This is what he's trying to go for. So also to alleviate the issues that come with the perception that clay is really a poor person's building material, and really show the people something that is attractive to them, where they also think that this is also a sign of progress. I think this is the prime example for how ancestral wisdom could really be revitalized and merged with modern day design. Now, for my second example, I would also take a clay example, which is the clay fridge. This is an innovation that dates back all the way to Egypt of around 2500 BC. In its essence, it's a structure where two clay pots are placed into each other with a layer of wet sand in between. And the food that is supposed to be stored, or even beverages, they're stored in the inner pot. The outer pot facilitates evaporation, so ultimately cooling the contents. Now, how effective can this really be? Well, it is able to lower the contents that are to be cooled by around 10 degrees. So that might not sound like much, you might think, but hear me out. According to the Journal of Food Science and Technology, a study was conducted in India, which found that relying on the clay fridge, vis-à-vis not relying on it, actually mitigated the food spoilage and food waste by 70%. And besides that, it also helped to preserve the nutritional value of the food, which is quite substantial. Now, this is a solution that it's highly adequate for the context. It's highly adequate. It is highly efficient. It is affordable. You know, the materials, they can be locally sourced. They're very cheap, if not even free. And one factor is also very important, which is the factor of self-reliance. So people and the communities can actually construct them themselves and also maintain them themselves. So this is a solution that is very relevant in context of hotter climates and also in contexts where there's a limited access to infrastructure as well as a limited access to electricity. It's an example for how a revitalization of ancestral wisdom can actually help and be a solution for underprivileged communities. Now, for my third example, as I also promised you at the beginning of my talk, we're also going to look at how frugal innovation that relies on ancestral wisdom can help us in advanced economies. So for this example, I would like to talk about carbon capture. So in the last years, one of the projects regarding carbon capture that has received the most hype and was the most relevant was the topic of direct air capture. So essentially a process where a machine extracts the carbon dioxide molecules out of the air. Now, this is a highly sophisticated and also highly relevant solution to trying to get back the carbon dioxide that we have emitted through, for example, the industry. But still, it requires huge sums of electricity. Electricity, even if it's green, that is then lacking in other places. So where does ancestral wisdom come into play here? Well, for that, we have to talk about indigenous forest management. The two main pillars of indigenous forest management are really about selective harvesting as well as controlled burning. So in essence, taking certain parts out of the forest that are not as active anymore and where there's a significant buildup, so mature trees that are not as active anymore, and taking them out of the forest, either through just basically harvesting them or on the other side through controlled burnings. That way also the materials, like the resources that are in the trees are re-emitted into the ground and new trees can grow. So in essence, taking out old trees so that new trees can grow. Well, one of the main functions of new grown trees is actually to take carbon dioxide out of the air. So sounds a little bit like natural direct air capture, isn't it? Well, but what do we do with the wood? Well, usually it's used as a fossil fuel. So if we basically burn it in order to get energy, we are re-emitting the carbon dioxide that they used to actually extract from the air. What we could do here is, well, one method could be to use the wood in construction, where it could partly replace the usage of steel and cement, which actually each account for about 5% of the global carbon dioxide emissions, which is quite substantial. Still, not all wood, not all trees are really adequate for construction. Well, what do we do with them? Well, there are methods such as woody mass burial, where the wood is actually, it is rather stored underground in an environment that prevents it from rotting away, because rotting away would again mean, well, the carbon dioxide it used to extract is again re-emitted, which we don't want, with the great benefit that the surface level can still be used for constructions of any sort. So for example, for erecting solar panels. I think this is an example which illustrates that it's not only about the revitalization, but also recontextualization in order to address a different problem. And the great question that I was asking myself here when I found these examples was really, why are these technologies muted as such? Why is ancestral wisdom muted? Well, one reason might just simply be the lack of understanding. So there's no understanding for how these solutions helped in the specific historical contexts. So there's also not the appreciation for the depth of the knowledge. Well, then on the other side, it could also just be that relying on frugal innovation and ancestral wisdom is just not seen as a beacon of development or a beacon of progress. So, for example, if we look at the HDI measure, the Human Development Index, it has one dimension that actually measures the material that your house is made of, where you live in. So if your house is made out of cement and steel, it actually ranks higher than if it's made out of clay. Even though a house out of clay might be in certain contexts way more appropriate and way more context specific. Well, and there might just be the third factor, which is the belief that modern day problems can really just be solved by modern day high-tech solutions. Well, let me leave you with one thought. The data analyst Frank Evans has once said, if every new idea is just derivative, go ahead, just derive them. I mean, of course, let's go for new innovations to address these problems. However, let's also pay close attention to unlocking the full potential of already existing ideas in order to create a sustainable future that builds on top of the wisdom of the past. Thank you very much.